Hello there and welcome back to Laurence Plays Factorio Planetary Pioneers, a mod pack with over 20 planets, of which we're on the second one, over 30 science packs, where we're about 5 or 6 in I think, and 5 players and 100 other mods besides, so lots going on here. And today I want to talk to you about our progress towards going to space. In Stream 4, I managed to put together some blue circuit production, and one of the things I always reckon on wanting to do with blue circuit production, and in fact red circuit production too, is to make sure I'm building those circuits on site. And I think I talked about this a couple of weeks ago when I was talking about the red circuit production, but I think it's important to make sure that you're building your green circuits and your red circuits where you're building your blue circuits, rather than pulling them from the main stream up here. Because it takes 20 green circuits to make a blue circuit, and at least 1 to make a red circuit as well, and another 2 to make a red circuit as well, you tend to find that if you try and use your main green circuit supply for making your red and blue circuits, it all just disappears very, very quickly. So down here I am producing green circuits in order to make red circuits, in order to make blue circuits, and well, we're still having a bit of a shortage of iron, it appears. That's all going into goodness knows what other things we're making. But the theory is here at least, and at least we do seem to have some green circuits available for everything else that's trying to use them. And so these are being made over here and then passed up onto the bus, where they're being passed rather a long way away, because the first thing I needed to make was the silo, so the launch silo, the rocket silo for launching rockets, and also the landing pad as well, because you need to be able to bring your rockets back down to Earth with a bump, or at least import stuff from them. So these are both important things to have. And the reason I built them over here, right at this end of the bus, is because this is where the concrete mix was available. And this is stuff, it's an intermediate for making concrete, but in this particular mod pack you actually need the concrete mix in order to make centrifuges and rocket silos and landing pads. And so that's being made down here in the middle of the iron ore area, because in order to make it you need sand, which comes out of crushers, and so it makes sense to have it in this sort of area, and we're getting a bit of it as a byproduct out of all of the other crushers as well. And you need to have iron ore, or at least crushed iron ore, in order to make the concrete mix, and then that concrete mix can be turned into actual concrete blocks, and that can then be turned into refined concrete. So we've got all these different varieties of concrete around here. And I thought, well, I don't really want to have to run this pipe of concrete or concrete mix all the way from here down to the other end in order to do stuff with my blue circuits that are being made over here. And in hindsight, I think that was a mistake. I should have brought it down. I should have brought it from here. I should have put it onto the belt and brought it along, because I ended up needing to bring electric motors and blue circuits all the way back up the bus anyway, and it would have been just as easy to have run the pipes down here as well as to bring them back up, and it would have meant that we weren't trying to stockpile massive quantities of blue circuits on the bus. And this is a huge waste of blue circuits. It's just having loads and loads of them it's sort of just sitting on the belt and not really being used. So in hindsight, I wish I'd done this differently. I don't know if it's too late now. I haven't really decided. I mean, it's never too late, obviously, but I could just swap these over. I don't know if it's worth doing it. I will have a think about it and make a decision in an upcoming stream. Or when I say make a decision, I probably mean I'll let Mark make a decision, because he's in charge of this planet. But otherwise, over here seemed like a good place to build these things, because we've got a lot of the resources we needed coming through. It was just these two that need to be brought over. But as I say, in hindsight, I think it was probably a mistake. Still, after quite a lot of waiting, because these are expensive buildings, as you can see by these numbers here, yes, we were able to make a rocket silo, and then another rocket silo, so we've got a spare one to sit in the box there and come back to if we ever need it later in the future. And that meant I could put the rocket silo down over here, and we could start thinking about making rockets. And making rockets this part's pretty vanilla. You need the processing units, more blue circuits, you need some low density structures, which I talked about making earlier, and that's the one that's a massive drain on your copper and plastic supplies, and we need rocket fuel as well, and we've not done that one yet. And so that meant a trip back over to the oil processing area over here, and having a look at making rocket fuel. That's done down here, where we're bringing in light oil, because it's the cheapest one to make, and therefore to make the solid fuel out of, and you also need light oil to make the actual rocket fuel as well. So you can see along here we've got the solid fuel being made in these machines, passed down into these two underneath, and this is the correct ratio. It's basically, so you can see there, we're making 1 solid fuel per second. Down here we're using half a solid fuel per second in each one of these, and it took me about 3 attempts to get all these machines in the right proportions, because apparently maths is difficult or something like that. Now, if you're paying attention, you'll have noticed that we seem to be struggling a little bit with light oil, and I'm not sure whether that's to blame on the sheer quantity of rocket fuel we're trying to make, although that said, this is now nearly backed up all the way back to the machines, so we've made nearly enough for this whole system to go to sleep, and that means it's now filling the bus all the way from here, down this belt, all the way along to here, so we've got a lot of rocket fuel sitting on the belt here. But also, the light oil is being pulled away by this pump over here to take it off into the defensive system that we were looking at last time. So that's going along here into these pipes and then into all the flamethrowers over here. And if we look here, this pipe here is basically full. But if we scroll back across here, we can see that this one is 2/3 full. And actually, when I looked at it just before the stream started, this was basically empty. So we are catching up at this point. We are nearly there. But this is currently taking basically all of the light oil that can be produced by the refineries and from cracking the heavy oil down. So you'll notice we are out of petroleum gas because we're still making plastic and sulfur as fast as we can, and we're not actually getting any extra petroleum gas from the light oil because that's all getting turned into flamethrower fuel and rocket fuel. So we're not in a great position at the moment, and the limiting factor over here is very much the amount of oil that we can pull out of the ground. So I think we are, in fact, as I think I've said in one of the previous videos, going to need to go off and tap another one of these patches. But I kind of don't want to do that until we've got trains set up, because otherwise it's just going to be running an incredibly long pipe all the way across the world to get from here to over here. And whilst that's certainly possible, and we do have some long pipes running around, it still feels a little bit excessive. In the same way that this rocket fuel pipe is excessive, and the blue circuit belt is a bit excessive, and it just feels like a lot of resources to have tied up, and some very, very long pipes, and I don't like it very much. And I know it's probably going to be the sensible way to get stuff over here and get all of this running a bit more productively, a bit more nicely. But I still don't really like it, and obviously that's very, very important. And we might still just build it anyway. You know how these things end. Anyway, so that is making the rocket fuel down here. Yes, lovely, and it's now back up into the factory where it's being produced. So we are going to stop using the light oil in a moment or two, and then maybe we'll get a few more products coming out from up here from the sulfur and plastic, and that'll all be okay. Okay, that's required to make the rockets themselves, and things are going quite well. We've made a rocket, and now it seems to be waiting for some more blue circuits in order to finish off its secondary rocket, and there aren't any coming in, and this is because I've messed it up. So previously I think we had the blue circuits coming out of here and then being fed up and passed in on as a second input along here, also going on the other side of the belt, and therefore being grabbed by this insert and put into here. It is also possible that I had blue circuits coming onto this belt, but I don't think I did. Anyway, either way, this is no longer working, so we are a bit short. We aren't going to make any more rockets after this one, so once this one's launched, we're not going to have any more. So I'm going to need to fix that. Oops. But in the meantime, we do at least have a rocket, and so over here, I've started making all the bits and pieces that are going to be required in space. So that means making the space platforms that get chucked into the red chests over here. It means making the space platform starter pack things, and we've got one of those ready, so we are able to launch it off and make a new space platform if we need to, and also started making thrusters. We've got 5 of those, which is probably the number it's intended to make. Yes, and we're only making up to 5 at the moment because they're kind of expensive. They need blue circuits as well, and we don't have a huge number of those. But we can make more of those as and when we require them, and yeah, this will allow us to start making space platforms. We've made a little bit of a start on that, but I'm not going to show it off just yet because it's not finished, and that's not the point of these videos. These videos are for looking at things once they've been completed. And so things are sort of mostly running quite well over here. We seem to have got, yes, we've got plentiful supply of the red and green circuits. Ah, yes, that's because these have stopped, because this is another bit of a fail. So before I put in this belt down here and everything was just heading off down that way, I decided it'd be a good idea to limit how many blue circuits were sent off down this belt over to the factory where we're making the rocket silos, and keep that at 50. On this belt, because that way we don't end up with too many. Then I started peeling them off down the side over here for other things, and so that has now caused this to fail, although that said, there's quite a decent number over here. But what I probably need to do is just come along over here, and actually I could just unlink that red cable like that, and then suddenly they'll all start working again, and we'll feed the blue circuits back out onto the belts and start using up the green circuits and the red circuits, which means we'll start using up this iron again, and that'll probably mean we'll run out of iron quite soon, because as I previously mentioned, making blue circuits is very, very resource intensive. But, you know, never mind, we're going to need them all at some point. On the subject of progress, Mark noticed that we're going to start needing brown science, the wooden science packs again. Looking in here, you can see already, in order to research yellow science, that requires the wooden science packs and the steam science packs as well, but we'll come back to those in a moment. And there's quite a lot of other things down here that where we get onto, once we get onto more advanced technologies, suddenly we start requiring the wooden steam science packs once again. So that's going to be a little bit tricky. However, we've got off to a good start with that by making the wooden science packs over here. I believe Mike set this up, yes, it says so on the right hand side. And so it's a nice simple recipe, as we've seen before. You take in the stone bricks and the wooden gears, and then you can output wooden science packs. Those are being passed down here, and like everything else, they're being fed into the labs. So we've got an extra science pack in there now, which is lovely. The problem that we're going to run into is that whilst, yes, making the wooden science packs is fairly easy, Making steam science packs is a bit more difficult because that requires gold, and we don't have any of that on this planet. That's a Lignumis thing. So we're going to have to come up with some way of shipping gold plate from Lignumis back over to Norvis, or possibly steam science packs from Lignumis over to Norvis, in order to get these steam science packs, in order to be able to do those researches. They're also made in a steam assembling machine, which is going to make things a little bit more awkward as well, because those are very, very low tier assembly machines, and we don't really want to have to use those if we can avoid it. However, fortunately, there is an alternative recipe which takes in steam as an input and allows that to be done in assembly machine 2s or 3s. So that's going to be how we're going to do it, I'm pretty sure. We'll generate steam somewhere, and instead of using it to power the assembly machines, we'll pass it in as an ingredient. However, this recipe still requires the gold plate, so we're still going to need to find a way to ship that over from Lignumis in one form or the other. We shall wait and see which of those is better, but it does mean that at this stage, until we manage to go to space properly and start shipping resources around, we aren't going to be able to progress any further. Fortunately, there are quite a lot of researches that only require red, green and blue, so there's quite a lot more science that we can do, but we are definitely going to get to a point fairly soon where we just can't do any more of these researches because they require something we haven't got yet. And that's happened a lot sooner than I was expecting it to. I was expecting to have lots of purple and yellow sciences available for us to do before we started running into problems with having to go off to other planets. But that's the interest of playing a new mod pack. You come across unexpected issues and have to find ways to sort them out. I touched recently on the logistics system and how it's allowed us to put roboports out across the base and start doing things with a bit more automation, building things with bots and that sort of thing, and that's lovely. And so that's allowed Tristan to get in and start doing some tidying up, which is definitely one of his favourite things to do. And the important part of that, or the relevant part of that, is putting in these storage chests like this one and this one. And these are both set with logistics filters. In this case, this one's for wood and this one's for coal. And these mean that if the bots have a piece of that and they're wandering around trying to decide what to do with it, rather than dumping it into the main logistics storage, or the chests of shame as we often call it, they will prioritise bringing it over and putting it into these chests, which means it can then be unloaded onto these belts and then put onto the bus and go into our normal system, where it can be used up as we would like it to be. And I can demonstrate this by looking in my inventory going, oh look, I've got some wood here, let's chuck that out into my trash slots. And here come the logistics bots. They're taking it away and they're putting it directly into this box here. And then that's getting unloaded onto the belt. And as we get through a certain amount of wood, it will then be passed out and it will be used up by the rest of the factory. I can do exactly the same with the coal. I can probably do the same with the iron ore as well, although I don't know where he's put the chest for that. And you can see, there we go, here the bots are taking it away, they're putting it into the box here, and then the iron ore is being taken away, and hopefully that's going to go somewhere sensible as well. I wouldn't like to guarantee it, because it looks like they're taking it the wrong way. But in theory, it'll be taken away and put somewhere sensible. These boxes, however, will not pull the wood or the coal out of the main logistics storage, which we have over here. So, unfortunately, anything that ends up in these chests will not be removed from them. So this sand will never be taken away and put into the correct place. This coal dust will never be taken away and used up properly, and so on and so on. Because the bots won't take from these chests to put into other yellow chests. That will need to wait for us to invent the blue chests, which will come some way further down the line. Those are the active requester chests, which will pull things out of any kind of storage chest and claim them instead. So these ones are sort of a poor man's blue chest. They'll take these things if the bots are flying some of them around, but if the chest fills up, or if there's some that's already gone into other yellow chests elsewhere, they won't claim that. So it's a partial success, and it does make a big improvement to the amount of junk that ends up in the logistics system. And I can demonstrate this by adding in another yellow chest here, or rather by dropping a blueprint in and telling the bots to add it, just like that. And so if I now put some more wood that I've gathered elsewhere into this chest, you'll see that that just remains there. The bots don't come and take it because, as far as they're concerned, there is no hierarchy between the two yellow chests, so they're quite happy just to leave it in there. But if I mark this chest for deconstruction, then bots will come flying in like this, and they'll take the wood out of there and they'll put it into this chest here before they demolish the yellow chest. And so that means we can essentially force them to tidy it up a little bit like that. And so because of that, we spent quite a lot of time in the last stream with bots sort of just flying endlessly back and forth, carrying massive quantities of junk, basically, from any random yellow chests that have been left around, or even any other types of chests that have been left around with stuff in them, and trying to sort them between the various chests that have been put down over here, and also the bulk storage that we saw over here. Somewhere. Yes, here it is, all the way over here. And so we could do that. We'll probably end up doing that again with the iron ore at some point. But still, it's massively helpful and will generally keep the factory a lot tidier, so it's worth doing. The other part of this upgrade, once we invent this slightly better logistics stuff, will be to replace all of these red chests in places like belt production with green chests, because that means you can then set up a request on the chest to pull in large numbers of things. In fact, Tristan's sort of done that in a kind of manual way with construction bot requests. But if we set these to be green chests, we can then tell them to always request 4,000 yellow belts, even when they're only being filled up to 500. And that means if any other yellow belts become available, perhaps because we've deconstructed something or because we've upgraded some belts somewhere, they'll get brought across and they'll be dropped off into here to be upgraded into red belts, rather than just leaving them in boxes scattered around the factory, which is both a waste of space and a waste of resources, and sort of just, upsets us a little bit for having all these boxes full of junk scattered around the place. Additionally, as part of this project, Tristan's expanded the Roboport coverage, so he's got it covering the entire factory, and including down to the uranium mine over here. Although I think that may well have been Mike, because he expanded the uranium mine. Thank you for doing that. He's also got a little bit of processing going on, and the hope is that we will end up with 40. Yes, there we go. We've got 48 pieces of shiny uranium in there, which means as soon as we invent Novarex processing, we can start that running over here in these centrifuges and start massively boosting our supply of U-235. For anyone who doesn't know, when you process uranium ore, dug up over here with the sulfuric acid, then processed over here, and most of what comes out from the processing is uranium-238, 99.3% of it in fact. But you do get 0.7% of uranium-235, and that's the exciting stuff that gives you all the power in your nuclear fuel and your nuclear weapons and your nuclear everything else. The 238 is mostly just useful for sort of padding and for ammunition. So yes, we've got quite a lot of the 238 coming in up here and filling up these boxes, but also the 235 is being pulled off over to here. Once we have the Novarex process, we can turn lots and lots of 235 and a bit of 238 into slightly more 235 than we started with, and that's very, very valuable because it means you can suddenly start breeding your 235, because it means you can suddenly start turning 238 into 235, which is far more valuable. You need to keep the two balanced reasonably well, of course, because everything you want to do with it requires a bit of each, but still, it's still very, very useful and very important to have both available. And I think that's a good place to stop this video. I've talked about a few more different things than I usually do in a single video, but they're all quite short updates, so I felt it made sense to sort of squish them in together. There's only so much I can say about having produced Wooden Science on Norvis, especially when we've already produced that science pack before, for example. But I hope you enjoyed it. It was interesting, and you'll come back for the next one. So these videos come out every Thursday and Friday night on the channel, so please make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any of those. There'll also be another stream, and we'll get a load more of this stuff done. That'll be on Monday evening at 7:30 PM UK time on Twitch and YouTube, so keep an eye out for those. And I'll be playing some more Foundry on Wednesday as well, so come along for that stream too. That's a new game that I've just started playing recently, which I would describe as being Factorio, but in a Minecraft world. So everything's made of cubes, you can build and dig and so on, and it's a bit more 3D, so you can have exciting things like finding ores underground rather than just sitting on the surface like they do in Factorio. So I hope to see you for all of that. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and so on, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.